Okay, so we're on Ein Gimel and Avodah Zarah. I had recorded a shir on this, at least on most of Amud Aleph, and then my phone ran out of batteries, and for some reason it didn't save. So that being said, let's try to. I'm quite tired. I had a long day today, but we're gonna do our best. So we're on 73. So just the end of the last sugya, just so we should be actually saying the whole daf, even though we said this already. Could the Amr Rav Huna Gufi Ishtei Kenish Kanin, that Rabbi Rav Huna himself drank from this type of spout that had several different spouts coming a fountain, a wine fountain. They have wine fountains like that, for Kiddush. And now we have our Mishnah Yainesa Chasav Oisa B'Cholshu Yain B'Yain Mayim B'Mayim B'Cholshu. So non-kosher wine, it's yain nesach. It's something that was offered as libation to an idol. It's prohibited, and the prohibition is even the smallest amount. And the fact is that here, when we're talking about yain nesach, it would seem that it's that it's actually also it's stam yenam. However, it seems that the Ramah says that that stam yenam is only aser b'shtia, not aser ba'anoah, because b'zman hazeh there really isn't any such thing as yain nesach. We could even go so far as to say is something like communion wine really doesn't have a din of nesach. It's not a nisuch, a yain. It's more of a zecher ba'alma and not a nisuch. It's not actually something that's offered in an idolatrous rite, but rather it's something to commemorate someone who they have very high esteem for, and to commune with that. It's different than offering a libation as a sacrifice, even though it is a sacrificial service. According to most churches, but it's a different. So still, it will be aser b'shtia, not necessarily aser ba'anoah, because the Ramah says like this. But anyway, yain nesach aser v'oser b'chol shehu. So non-kosher wine is prohibited, and the prohibition is in the slightest amount. Yain b'yain b'mayim b'chol shehu. If wine is mixed with wine, kosher wine and non-kosher wine, or water is mixed with non-kosher water, meaning water that was actually worshipped or actually offered as a sacrifice to an idol. Just touching the water doesn't make the water, stam meimam or something like that. There's no din that just if they touch water or they own water. It's only if it was actually offered as a libation or actually worshipped. Yain b'mayim u'mayim b'yain b'noisim tam. But if wine is mixed with water, or water is mixed with wine, prohibition is if most of it's kosher and a little bit it's not kosher. If the non-kosher portion changes the flavor, imparts a positive flavor, then it's already prohibited. This is a general rule. Min b'mina b'mashahu. When you have two things that are the same thing mixed together, wine with wine or water with water, and really anything, then it's only this, and then even the slightest amount, a tiny drop, is prohibited. V'shaloi b'mina b'noisin tam. But if it's two different types, two different species, two different kinds, then it's only if a flavor is imparted. Generally, the sages said that it's 1 in 60 parts. So the Gemara is going to discuss this Mishnah. Ki Yasser of Dimi Amar Rabbi Yochanan Hamar Yain Nesach V'Chavos Lavar Filu Kol Hayom Kulo Rishon Batel. Rav Dimi came from the Holy Land to Babylonia. He taught in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. We're going to have a lot of teachings from Rabbi Yochanan that were brought, and there seems to be some lack of clarity when the teachings are brought. It says if one pours non-kosher wine from a barrel to a cistern is a pit in the floor. Well, it's even if he's pouring all day long, each drop that's poured in is nullified bit by bit, and the whole thing remains kosher. Perhaps it's not kosher for drinking, but it's kosher. It's permitted to have benefit. But the point is that even though it's the same kind, but one tiny drop falls in, then the next drop, and it's the whole thing is kosher. Next drop, the whole thing is kosher. Next drop, even if at one point you have more of the non-kosher than the kosher, but because each drop that fell in was nullified, then the whole thing it remains kosher. So Tanan, we have a Mishnah in our Mishnah. Yain Nesach Chasav Roisa B'Chol Shu My Love to Kanafel Usur L'Gayatera. So then this seems to be, our Mishnah seems to contradict this, because it says that non-kosher wine is prohibited in benefit, and the prohibition is even the slightest amount. So isn't this where the non-kosher wine fell in the kosher wine? Lo, the kanafel ater l'gayisura. So the answer is no. It's where the kosher wine fell into the non-kosher wine. And so therefore, when whatever it's falling into, there's a tiny drop of kosher wine falls into a big vat of non-kosher wine, that drop of kosher wine becomes not kosher, and so to more and more, even to the point where in the opposite way, that even when eventually there's more kosher wine than non-kosher wine, it remains not kosher because the kosher wine was nullified by dropping in. Tashma, so come listen to this. Yain b'mayim. If wine was mixed with water, the nicing tam, then it's prohibited when there's a flavor imparted. My lav the ka nafel chama d'isur l'maya the teira. Isn't this where the non-kosher wine fell into the kosher water? No. The ka nafel chama the teira l'maya d'isur. Rather, it's where the kosher wine falls into the non-kosher water, like we said above. So we should say the first clause of the Mishnah is talking about non-kosher water, and the second clause of the Mishnah is talking about non-kosher water. And the later clause of the Mishnah says that when water falls into wine, then the prohibition is when a flavor is imparted. So then that seems to contradict it also. So Amalach Rav Dimi. So Rav Dimi said, Kula masnisan eter l'gayisura. The whole mission is where something kosher falls into something not kosher. The first case is where kosher wine falls into non-kosher water. The second case is where kosher water falls into non-kosher wine. When Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he said the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Amar yain nesach when tzar tzur katan lavora filu kolam hayom kulo, rishon batel, v'davcher tzar tzur katan delon nefisha mudei, v'chavish the nefisha mudei loy. So Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef came from the Holy Land to Babylonia. He said the name of Rabbi Yochanan, if someone pours non-kosher wine from a small pitcher into a cistern, then each drop is nullified, and so the whole thing is kosher, This is a small bottle that doesn't have a large spout. But a barrel has a big spout, so then it would seem that this leniency would not apply. So when Ravan came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he had a different report of what Rabbi Yechanan taught. Yain nesach shenafal labor, v'nafal sham kitan shalmayim, rein es a heter k'ilu einoi, v'ashar mayim Ravan olav matlan. That if non-kosher wine fell into a cistern of kosher wine, and then if a pitcher of water also fell in there, we look as if the kosher wine is not there, and whatever is left, the water becomes more than it, and it's all nullified. So then, also the whole thing's kosher. Kasser of Shmuel bar Yehuda, Amar B'Yechanan. When Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda came, said the name of B'Yechanan, Lashanu Alash Nafal Kison Shalmayim Tchila. This is only talking where the flask of water fell in first to the kosher wine of Alay Nafal Sham Kison Shalmayim Tchila. But if the flask of water didn't fall first there, Matzah Mina is Mina V'Neir. So then they're both the same kind, and they got stirred up together. So then it's not kosher. Ikad demasni la masnisen. There's another version of our Mishnah. Yain kol shahu. If wine is mixed with wine, even the slightest amount makes the whole thing not kosher. So Amar of Shmuel bar Yehuda, Amar bi Yochanan, Shmuel bar Yehuda said in Yochanan, Lashana Shalai Nafal Shem Kisin Shamayim. So this is only taught where a pitcher of water didn't fall in. But if a pitcher of water fell in, we consider as if the kosher wine was not there. V'hashar and the rest, Mayim Rav and 11 bottle. I say the water overwhelms and nullifies it, and then it's kosher. So Maya kavein l'de masnei la amasnisin bein l'de masnei la de Ravin. So what's the difference between the teaching of the Mishnah and the ruling of Ravan? Man the masnei la amasnisin loy boy tchila. The one who taught like the Mishnah doesn't require that the water falls in first. The Masnei la the Ravan, but the one who teaches like Ravan, by Tchila, he requires that the water should fall in first. So Itmar, it was said like this: Yain nesach shnafal labor. If non-kosher wine fell into a pit of kosher wine, a cistern of kosher wine, nafal shan kisan shalmayim, and then a pitcher of water fell in. Amar Chizkiah said, now we're on Amud Beis, Hikdilu v'Isser Aser. If it was increased through something that's not kosher, the whole mixture is not kosher. Dilu beheter, but if it was increased because you added something that's kosher, mutter, then it's kosher. Rabbi Yechanan Amar Filu Hikdilu v'Isser mutter. Rabbi Yechanan said even if it was non-kosher wine that was added, the mixture is kosher. So Amalei Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Yirmiyah said to Rabbi Zera, Rabbi Zera Leima Chizkiah Rabbi Yochanan B'Hukta the Rabbi Glezer Rabbanan Konfliki. Maybe we should say that Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan are arguing based on the argument of Eliezer and the rabbis. This none. We have a Mishnah in Orla. So Or shall Chulin shall Truma Shnaflu Seicha Isa. If you have so'or is like sourdough. If it's from both regular, plain, secular chulin and of sourdough leaven, and sourdough leaven of truma, of heave offering that only a kohen, only a priest can eat. Shenaflu seicha isa, and they fell into a dough which was permitted for any Jew to eat. It was chulin. So we had this Mishnah before. From each yeast source on its own, yeast leavening agent, the sourdough, whatever we want to call it, there was not enough to leaven the dough on its own. But if they combined together, they became chametz. Eliezer said, I'm following the last one. But the sages say, whatever one, meaning, what do you mean if we follow the last one? Meaning if the kosher fell in second, the whole thing's kosher. If the truma fell in second, the whole thing's truma. I mean, it's both kosher, but one's only kosher for a kohen and one's kosher for an Eacher. The sages say, "Ben Shlof listed chila ben besof eino asad sheiboy kadei lachmetz." The sages say when whatever's not kosher or whatever is truma or whatever you want to say, whether it fell in first or second, if there's not enough in there to leaven, it's not unkosher unless the leavening agent was enough to make it leaven on its own. Sisra. So can you even compare these? V'amar Abaye. Abaye said, "Leishanu l'shekodam v'sila kas iser." They only taught this where you came and removed the prohibition before the permitted thing fell in, meaning the sourdough went in and they quickly took it out. But if you didn't stop it from coming out, then it's prohibited. Chizkiya damer kaman. So who's Chizkiya saying like Allah? Hacha b'roin k'mefligi. So the question is whether we look at it, whether it consider it's not there, how we view it. B'yechanan islay. According to B'yechanan, we do hold like this. Mi islay or B'yechanan roin. Does B'yechanan hold this concept of roin, of that we look at it like this? For boy minei Rabbi Asi, Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Asi asked Rabbi Yechanan. Shnei kaises. We have 2 cups of wine. Echad shel chulin, echad shel truma. One is regular chulin, kosher for any Jew, and one is truma that only a kohen can drink. Mazagan. You mix them together. You diluted each of them separately. And then you mix them both together. Mao. So what's the law? The law. V'lei pashatle. He didn't have an answer. Imperial like pashatle. So at first he didn't have an answer. Let's say pashatle. But in the end he had an answer. At Mernami, the same thing. Amar Rabbi Ami, Amar Rabbi Yechanan. Ami said Rabbi Yechanan, V'amar Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yechanan. Some say Rabbi Asi said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan. Beis koises, 2 cups, shnei koises, echad shel chulin, echad shel truma. One is chulin and one is truma. Bazagan, they mixed each one to dilute it to make it drinkable. V'ervan zebezen, and mixed them together. Roy in a seheter kilo einoi. You look at what's kosher as if it's not there. Whatever is left, you add water to nullify it, and then the whole thing is kosher. Okay. Back to what the Mishnah says. This is the general. Min b'minoi b'mashahu. If 2 things are the same kind, and they're mixed together, and one is kosher and one is not, the slightest amount makes the whole thing not kosher. But if they're 2 different kinds, only and the majority is kosher and the minority is not kosher, it only becomes not kosher, the whole mixture, if it imparts a flavor, which generally we say is 1 part in 60 is enough to impart a flavor. Rabbi Shmuel Damar Tavai, Rabbi Shmuel both say, Kol Yisurin Shebeter B'Minim Mashahu. Any thing that's not kosher in the Torah and they're mixed together with the same kind, a kosher and not kosher amount, the slightest amount makes the whole thing not kosher. Because they're 2 different kinds, it's only if it imparts a flavor. Ze'aklal, this is the rule. What does this come to include? To call it means anything that's prohibited in the Torah. Rabbi Yechon and Reish Lakish both say, with all the prohibited substances mentioned in the Torah, whether they're mixed with the same kind or different kinds, it's only if it imparts a flavor. Except for things that were not that tevel means something that was not tithed, and yain nesach is non-kosher wine, but minim mashahu. If they're both the same kind, it's the slightest amount. But if they're different kinds, it's only if a flavor is imparted. Zeh klal. So why does it say it's a general rule? Latuye tevel. That comes to include tevel, includes something that wasn't tithed. Tanya comes to say the Rav Shmuel. Tanya comes to say the Rabbi Yechon and Rish Lakish. So there's different prices. Some that agree with Rav and Shmuel, and some that agree with Rabbi Yechon and Rish Lakish. Tanya comes to Rav and Shmuel. The opinion that follows Rav and Shmuel, Brisa says that all the prohibitions in the Torah, if they're mixed with the same kind, it's the slightest amount that prohibits, and if they're different kinds, it's only from in parts of flavor. Tanya Kavasei, the Rabbi Yechon and Rish Lakish. There's a Brisa teaching on Rabbi Yechon and Rish Lakish. All the prohibited substance in the Torah, whether it's the same kind or different kinds, it's only prohibited b'nais and tam if it imparts a flavor. Except for the case of tevel, of something that's not tithed, and non-kosher wine, that if it's the same kind, it's the smallest amount that's prohibited, and it was two different kinds, it's only from the parts of flavor. So we understand why we're strict with non-kosher wine, because of the severity of the sin of idolatry. But what makes teva, what makes something that's not tithed so strict? So the answer is, if something is able to make something kosher, that's the same way it can make something not kosher. If you tithe just a little bit, that's enough to make the whole thing kosher. You could take one little bit of grain of wheat as truma for a whole pile. All right, we're going to ask you. Hello?